Chapter 10. The Fall of Tristan and Yolaine. Kitten darted under a table against the wall, her scales turning the same grey-black as the stone. Dane looked frantically for a weapon of some kind as the cold fang entered. Watching it, she knew coming here had been a mistake. The narrow stair had hampered the immortal as much as it did her. Now the cold fang had room to move. Like the one slain by Taka, this cold fang was beaded in bright shades of green. Frost flowers sprouted ahead of its advance. It was quicker than the other, and pursued her down the hall. She raced away from it, checking the weapons on the wall. Broadswords were the main choice, but these were the two-handed kind favored by mountain lords. She could never lift one. She saw two maces, but they were higher on the wall than the swords. Trying to get one would slow her down too much. Looking back at her pursuer, she crashed into a suit of armor. Quickly she rolled out of the way as it went over. From a metal glove dropped a long-handled, double-bladed war axe. She seized it, as heavy as it was, and got up. The cold fang stared, long tongue slipping out and in, tasting the air, then sidled to her left. She backed, keeping the blade between them, trying not to meet the thing's eyes. Her arm shook in an effort to hold her weapon up. It was not meant for a teenage girl's use. Suddenly the immortal lunged, far more quickly than she would have dreamed, jaws popping open and fangs dropping down. She squeaked and darted back. The axe proved her undoing, as the long handle tripped her. She threw it to the side and rolled, then scrabbled to her feet. When she looked for the cold fang, it caught her eyes and held them. Although she fought, she was frozen in place. Kitten, now rage scarlet, jumped from the rear to fasten her jaws in the cold fang's spine. Blueness and Scrap, behind her, leaped for its eyes. The immortal keened, half rising to its hind feet as it tried to rid itself of the cats with one paw and the dragon with the other. Scrap went flying, to strike the wall. Free of the cold fang's grip, Dane seized the axe and moved in close. "Let go!" She put all her power into the order. Blueness and Kitten jumped clear. She swung with all her strength to bury the axe in the cold fang's skull. It wrenched away, yanking the weapon from her grip, but the axe was firmly seated. The immortal thrashed on the stone floor, weakening with each convulsion. At last it was still. The girl looked at the mess she had made, at the axe, the shattered immortal, and the gouts of dark blood all around, and vomited. When she was done, she wiped her mouth and went to Scrap. Blueness crouched beside her, trembling and trying to wash the younger cat's still face. "No, Blueness," whispered Dane. "Let me." She picked up the small body. It was limp in her hands, without any trace of life. "She is just a kitten," Blueness remarked, sounding lost. "She is forever telling me she is a grown cat, but she is only a kitten." Dane's eyes were streaming as she took the badger's claw from her neck and put it on Scrap's body. "Badger, you owe me. You and Old White and the other animal gods owe me. She would be alive right now if you hadn't brought me here. Now do something." No reply came as precious seconds crawled by. She had failed. Hugging that soft body to her chest, Dane rocked back and forth. "It is for you, Queen Claw." Whoever the speaker was, he wasn't the badger. There was a hint of pack song in his voice, of cold nights filled with wolves singing. "She is one of yours." "I am glad you see that, Pack Father," purred a new voice, silky and cruel. Blueness jumped to his feet, looking frantically for the speaker. "As it happens, it pleases me to grant this prayer. A kitten deserves another life. Do not make a habit of asking, though, Dane. The gods are not at your beck and call. And finish what you came here to do." Life roared under Dane's hands like a fire. Scrap opened her eyes. "Where is Blueness? I dreamed I was in the fog and he wasn't with me." Dane put her down, tucking the silver claw into a pocket. The tom instantly began to wash his Scrap, purring so loudly he roused echoes. The younger cat screwed up her face and let him do it. The girl rose, feeling weak in the knees. "You stay here and rest," she said. "I have something to do." Picking Kitten up, she wiped the dragon's muzzle clean of cold fang blood and carried her to the stair. As they climbed, she reclaimed those arrows that were unbroken and her crossbow. The tower door was locked. "Why did they bother?" she asked bitterly, putting the dragon down. "They had their monster to guard it, didn't they?" Kitten peered into the keyhole, tail twitching. Standing back from it, she croaked. The metal of the lock glowed dull orange. The wood around it began to smoke. Then the color faded, the lock still firmly in place. Kitten stretched out her neck and croaked again, holding the note twice as long. She stepped aside just as the lock blew off the door. It fell down the stairs and continued to fall, its rattling audible long after it had gone out of sight. Without a word, Dane opened the door. Inside was a table on which lay the model of the valley, complete with its barrier. Behind that, on a tripod over a low brazier, a small pot of reddish-brown liquid bubbled gently. That alone was interesting, because the fire was out. Dane stared at it. Could such a tiny amount of liquid, barely 2 cups full at best, really cause so much damage? "Don't go near that," she ordered. Kitten shook her head emphatically, and Dane turned to the model. What looked like a solid wall of fire in the western pass was a thin line of light that curved over the miniature valley, as if a clear bowl were placed on top of it. The bowl sparkled with multiple colors, the yellow of Tristan's magic being the most common one. Embedded in the rivers into the northern and southern passes were 2 round, polished black opals. Drawing her belt knife, the girl reversed it, gripping it tightly where hilt met blade. She slammed the pommel into the north opal hard, and a crack snaked over the face of the stone. The barrier darkened, then brightened. She struck the opal again, and it cracked in half. Dark lines pursued each other over the curve of the magical light, but she could still see that curve. "Stands to reason," she told Kitten, walking around the model to the far end. "If you've got 2 stones holding the thing in place, you have to break 'em both. After all, nothing else has been easy since I came to Dela, so why should this be?" She slammed the knife hilt into the second opal, knocking loose a tiny chip. A thin whine filled the air. She glanced at Kitten, who also looked for its source. The whine built in volume, higher than anything the dragon or Dane could produce. It raised the hair on the back of the girl's neck. Gritting her teeth, she adjusted her grip on the abused hilt of her belt knife. "For the wolves," she whispered, and slammed the stone again. Whether the previous blow had weakened it more than it had appeared, or whether Old White lent Dane his strength, this did the trick. It shattered explosively. Dane covered her eyes with her free hand, and the room blew up. Her return to awareness was heralded by a dreadful stench in her nostrils. She gagged and struggled against the iron band that clamped her arms to her sides, then sneezed repeatedly. "Relax," a familiar voice said. "It's just wake flower." She blinked. The dark shape in her blurry eyes sharpened into a long nose, a full mouth, and black fringed eyes. A bruise puffed up his left cheekbone, and his shirt was ripped. "No flower ever smelled like that," she said. Numer helped her to sit up and eased his grip on her arms and back. "But it does," he replied innocently. "It grows in swamps, and its scent attracts flies to carry its seed rather than bees, but botanists judge it to be a true flower all the same." He let her go and placed the stopper in the tiny vial he had put under Dane's nose. The vial itself went into his belt purse. "Are you well enough to sit unaided? I should deal with the blood rain." "Go ahead, be my guest." Dane eased back until the wall supported her. Kitten, who had been poking in the remains of the table, came to examine her, making sure the girl was in one piece. Numer went to the small, bubbling cauldron. "How long have I been out?" the girl asked. "If your unconsciousness commenced with the barrier's destruction," it did. "I believe it's some 2.5 hours, then, judging by the length of time it took me to reach you. Once the barrier vanished, I assumed bird shape and flew here, but I ran into delays. Also, my flight skills are rusty." "What kind of delays?" "I believe 2 of the Huroks managed to shed the magical binding that kept them here. They crossed my path and took exception to me for some reason. It took me an hour to get rid of them." "What about Spots and Mangle? Did you leave them up there alone? And risk your wrath? I told them to find you, and made sure to lead the Huroks away from them. Now give me a moment here." His lips moved, though she heard nothing. A feeling of tension built up in the room, centering on the pot of liquid. Kitten rocked to and fro, intent on Numer, whistling under her breath. His hands moved to write a letter or rune of some kind on the air in black fire. Just when Dane thought she might scream from the pressure, there was a pop, and the cauldron vanished. "Where did you send it?" she asked when she could breathe again. "Somewhere else," he replied. "Not a place as you would think of one. I am sorry I did not think to warn you of the possibility of a backlash from the barrier's destruction. It was Tristan's little joke, a surprise for whomever he asked to undo the spell. He often pulled such pranks when we were in school together. Stiffly, Dane got to her feet. Some prank, she muttered. Without warning, she was caught up in an extremely tight hug. You have no idea how glad I am to see you, Magelet, Numer said, and put her down. Dane wiped suddenly leaky eyes on his sleeve. Maybe a little, she replied, and grinned at him. It's mutual, you know. She collected her bow, checking to see if the knocking about it had received broke any important parts. Numer picked up Kitten. Now to find Tristan if he survived the excitement. I hope he did. A cold glint in his eyes made the girl shiver. I have some things to say to him, and none of them are goddess bless. They went down into the castle, then to the courtyard. Outside, Dane felt an immortal's approach. Numer, look, she said, and pointed. Overhead soared a Hurok, Tristan on its back. Sweat darkened the weary creature's sides, and blood flowed from around the bit in its teeth. Crows, led by the one who had carried Tate's note for Dane, mobbed Hurok and rider, stabbing with beaks and claws. Tristan hurled darts of yellow fire at them, which the crows scrambled to avoid. Move! Dane ordered the birds. They jeered, balked of their prey, and drew off. The girl swung her bow up, took aim, and let a razor-sharp arrow fly. She was fitting another in the notch as the first one struck the Hurok in the throat. Tristan threw himself free. Yellow fire cushioned and slowed his fall to earth. Dane's second bolt, as the Hurok dropped, struck home just under his left wing. The creature screamed hatred, wings beating. She grabbed a third bolt and loaded it, just in case. The scream, however, had been a last defiance. The Hurok's wings collapsed, and it plummeted into the lake. Tristan drifted, like a dandelion seed, to land on his feet near the gate. Numer advanced to meet his foe as black, sparkling fire gathered around his hands. Tristan, I am very disappointed in you, he said amiably. Tristan pointed. Yellow lightning crackled through the air between them, splintering on a shield of black fire that appeared around Numer. Come on, Kit, Dane said, backing toward the wall. I don't think he wants help. She swore as she sensed the approach of more immortals, Stormwings this time. Rakosh and his flock were coming in fast. Ignoring stiff and bruised muscles, the girl raced for the stair that led onto the wall, ignoring an explosion in the courtyard. Kitten, who had climbed enough for one day, stayed to watch the mages with fascination. A fresh explosion from below made Dane stumble and nearly fall on the open stair. She caught herself and forced her aching legs on. When she reached the parapet, the Stormwings were almost directly overhead, 20 yards up. From below came a howling screech, and Tristan's furious, You can't beat me, Aram! You never had the belly for combat magic! Dane glanced at her friend. Numer stood on a rock spire. Except for that, the earth around him was a giant crater. A line of blood ran from his mouth, and he was coated in dust, but he seemed well. Tristan battled the tendrils of a clump of roses that twined around him. Between the crows and those thorns, the mage's elegant clothes and skin were in tatters. His look of amused good nature was gone, replaced by a fury that twisted his handsome face into a mask. The Stormwings could throw the contest Tristan's way if she allowed them to interfere. Dane swung her crossbow up and sighted on their chieftain. Lord Rakosh! She cried in her best parade ground voice. He hovered, waiting. The others also hovered, watching him. Several had arrows in their living flesh. Others bore wounds from swords, claws, and teeth. All were streaked with smoke and soot. I should have seen it would come to this, Rakosh said. What do you want? She blinked. What did she want? Once she had wanted to kill every Stormwing she found, but was that still true? It seemed as if, ever since she had come here, someone was telling her that because she didn't like a creature's look, it didn't mean that creature was bad. She still didn't like Stormwing looks, but Rakosh seemed almost decent. And how could she tell Mora she had killed her friend? I'd like to end this bloodshed, I think, she replied. Her voice squeaked a little with embarrassment and nerves. She cleared her throat. You and me have no quarrel here. Not really. We don't like each other, but you can't go killing everyone you don't like. Isn't that so? Your rustic philosophy amuses me, drawled Rakosh. Go on. Kill the ground-pounding bitch, gasped the brunette female who once had told Mora that Dane was a Stormwing killer. Silence, Rakosh snarled at her. Dane waited for them to be quiet. Maybe you've heard of my aim. I don't miss often. I put out Queen Zahane and Bitterclaw's eye, in case you hadn't heard. That was before she pushed me into killing her. But that shot was made with a longbow, the Stormwing Lord pointed out. I'm as good with a crossbow. At this range, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. I'm willing to negotiate, though, since you're a friend of Mora's. You boast, barked a male Stormwing. Crossbows have no range, 50 feet at best. Don't they? He asked Rakash. The Stormwing Lord looked at Dane and shrugged. He's new from the Divine Realms. He thinks humans run screaming at the sight of us. Dane sighted, loosed, and swung the bow down to redraw the string and load, all before the newcomer had registered the fact that the crossbow bolt had tapped his wing. A single feather dropped away and plummeted into the lake. By the time it struck the water, the bow was back on her shoulder and she was ready to fire again. I have a 200-yard range on this, she called. Care to try me? Rakash watched her for a long time, metal wings fanning the air. Dane waited him out. When he spoke at last, his voice was quiet. I am not as old as Zahane and Bitterclaw's was, not as crafty or as powerful. But I believe I may be wiser. To his flock, he said, Let's go, my friends. We must tell the Emperor to expect no more Dunlath opals. He looked at Dane and shook his head. I suppose we're both losing our minds. Please tell Mora I said goodbye and good luck. Gliding to the lake's surface, he banked and turned south. No! Yelled the noisy female. She stooped, talons ready to strike. Behind her, in the same fast attack mode, came the male who had lost a feather to her arrow. The angle they had picked was opposite the sun. Its rays hit their feathers, blinding Dane. She didn't panic, but listened for the nearest moving body, and aimed. Eyes filled with sunspots, she fired. The female shrieked. Down with the crossbow, foot in the stirrup, both hands on the string, pull it up over the release. Something big clacked nearby. She ducked as the male hurtled over her head. He would return with a fresh attack. Bolt from the quiver into the notch, clip in place, bow to her shoulder. Her vision began to clear. He was coming down, almost directly on top of her. She aimed, shot. The arrow slammed into his chin and up through his skull. The impact knocked him askew. He plummeted into the wall with a crash of metal and slid to its base. The female was already in the lake, sinking as her blood spilled into the water. The rest of the flock had watched from above. When she looked up to see if they might avenge their friends, they wheeled as one and resumed their flight south. Automatically, she redrew the bow and placed another bolt in the notch. She had locked her attention so hard on the Stormwings that the mage's fight had slipped her mind briefly. Now she looked down. Numor was clothed in a clear, jelly-like substance that burned white-hot. His mouth moved inside that burning sheath. It melted away like thawing ice, flame shrinking as it sank into the ground. Tristan was tearing away the strands of a giant silk cocoon. "You are not taking me to that weak-willed idiot in chorus!" he cried. The cocoon flamed and vanished, leaving him covered in powdery ash. He looked the worse for wear, swaying as he stood, his breath coming in gasps. Lifting his hands, he threw a storm of yellow arrows at Numor, who shielded himself. "Tristan, enough!" the taller mage snapped. "If you rush me, I'll do something we'll regret. Your death would be a criminal waste of your talents." Tristan glared at him. Sweat made tracks in the ash on his face. "You puling, gutless bookworm!" On the gravel at his feet, it had once been stone blocks, a spin of brambles, old cocoon, and leaves caught flame. "You think you'll come away golden, don't you?" The fiery dust devil roared high to become a tornado of flame. "You and your honor code, your sermons on what we owe the ungifted. You made me sick in Carthage, and you still do. Well, you will not walk away unscorched." He pointed at Dane, and the funnel leaped for her. She fired. Numor said a word that made the air scream. The tornado vanished. Her bolt plunged into the tree that was Tristan's staghorn. Dane gaped, leaning for support on the bow as her knees wobbled. "So," she remarked when she had the breath. Thank you. Was that a word of power?" "Yes. What is he? Can you tell?" "I think it's fair rude to make him a tree and not know what kind he is." "Dane. Apple. Knowing him, probably a sour apple tree." "Will this hurt some other part of the world?" Numor sighed. "As I recall, this word's use means somewhere there is a tree that is now A two-legger. He looked around. His stone pedestal was still intact, but the crater around him was at least 4 feet deep and 6 feet wide. How do I get out of this thing? Dane remembered one more vital task. Use a word of power or something, she called and ran for the stairs. I need to find Belden and Yolaine. Belden was easy to find. He lay on his bed, dressed plainly in black, his face white. The cause of his final sleep had spilled from a tipped-over cup on the bedside table. It was a thick, pale liquid Dane recognized from Numer's poison collection. Beside it was a note written in a sharp, decisive hand. She knew it was rude to read others' letters, but she wanted to see why he had picked what she felt was a coward's way out of the mess he'd helped to make. The note read, She has learned the king knows of our plan. Nowhere in Tortle is safe when the king is a mage who knows who to look for, she says. The very trees will reach out to capture us. She said we must get away, that there will be a welcome for us in Carthage. I refused. I gambled, and I lost. I will not bring more disgrace to my name. I do not blame her for luring me from the loyal path. I do not have to be tempted. My wrongdoing is my own, and I accept the responsibility. Dane left the room and closed the door behind her, feeling sick and angry. She could not think about Belden now. The important thing was that Mora's sister was going to escape. Mice! She called. Is Yolane here? Their denial came back instantly. Yolaine was long gone. She left, said Cloud in the stable. It was about the same time as the explosion in the tower. I tried to stop her, but she got away on horseback. Dane ran outside to Numer. He had reached the steps, where he sat with his head on his knees. Yolaine's gone. We have to go after her. Dane, I can't. I'm used up for the moment. He was gray under his swarthiness. What about Belden? He killed himself. He's in there. She indicated the castle with a jerk of her head. If she's to get away clean, she must be headed west. She could see from here the north and south passes are pretty hot right about now. Dane? A voice called. You here? Aikiju, armed with a longbow that looked like a child's toy, walked in the gate. With her was the long lake pack. They raced to greet Dane in wolf fashion. Numer was included in the ceremony and had his face eagerly watched by Short Snout, Fleetfoot, and Russet. Dane looked at the ogre. Her aqua skin bore collections of bruises, grazes, and soot, and a rip in her tunic revealed a shallow cut on her belly. What's wrong? Were you driven back? How did you get here so fast? No, replied Aikiju. We win. My brothers lock up men that still live. 2 mages dead. 1 fall from Hurok when I shoot this. She held up the bow. 1 killed by many little speckled birds. Starlings, Dane said. Speckled birds, Aikiju agreed. I take boat to find you. Pack come too. There is no more for us to do there, explained Brokefang. Once the ogres chose to fight, nothing could stop them. The humans were scared already, after the work the people did on them. Perhaps they could have fought better with their weapons and horses, but the horses were gone and the weapons were ruined. You look bad, Aikiju was telling Numer. He smiled up at her. So do you. Dane had an idea. If you have Yolaine's scent, could you track her, even if she's on horseback? She is one of the 2-leggers that brought this on us? Frostfur's eyes glittered angrily. All of it was done in her name, the girl replied. Then we will find her, Brokefang said. Where is her scent? Blueness and Scrap guided Dane to Yolaine's rooms. The girl returned to the pack with a handful of the noblewoman's clothes. Everyone carefully sniffed the delicate gardenia scent that rose from the garments as Dane removed her belt, purse, dagger, and boots. She left the crossbow as well. What are you doing? Numer demanded. The pack's going to find her, and I'm going with them, sort of. I have to sit in the lake, though, to help with the magic. I'm awfully tired, and I am not going to risk her getting away. Head out, Brokefang. I'll follow. Numer did not protest as she ran to the docks where the Faeve's boats were kept. She had learned from him the trick to add to her power when she was tired by getting cold and soaked. She only wished the long lake were salt water, since that worked best of all. You can't have everything, she told herself as she tied a rope to the ladder that led to the water. When the knot tested firm, she jumped in. She gasped. The lake was icy, a product of mountain streams. Tying the rope to her waist, she clung to the last step and reached out, listening for the pack. They were near the end of the causeway. Her mind blurred when she joined with Brokefang. When it cleared, she knew she couldn't stay in the water, not for as long as pursuit might take. She fought to heave herself onto the ladder, scrabbling at the wooden stair with her paws. The effort to drag her soaked body from the lake was painful. Her muscles screamed. Then she was out and leaping up the steps to the dock. At the top, something tugged at her middle, a rope tied much too loosely. She didn't need that anymore. Wriggling out of it, she paused and shook out her fur, ridding herself of what felt like pounds of water, then looked for the wolves. They waited for her where bridge and land met. She raced to join them. "Let's go," she said when they would have greeted her all over again. Brokefang stood in front of her, ears and tail erect, upper lip barely skinned back over his teeth. "Are you going to lead the hunt?" he demanded. She looked at him as if he were crazy. "You know more about hunting this way than me," she retorted. "I'll follow you." "Very good." The upper lip went down. He turned and cast around in the dirt for a moment. She watched, impressed. How can he sort through these incredible smells? She wondered. There were dozens here, a baffling patchwork of scents. "Come," Brokefang ordered, and trotted away. Dane let Frostfur go next, standing well back in case the chief female decided to bite. She followed them and the other wolves strung out behind her. Outside the village, she picked up the first clean scent of Gardenian horse. It was the newest odor on a road littered with yesterday's droppings. For the first time, she was glad that the humans had chosen to remain out of sight today. It made Yolane's trail stand out all the more. At the crossing with the north road, they met Spots and Mangle. The horses went to the side of the road, farthest from the wolves, and waited for them to pass, ears flat, eyes rolling. It was only because they knew these wolves that the horses stayed on the road at all. She halted. "Spots! Mangle!" she called. "It's me! Don't be scared." "Dane?" Mangle took a hesitant step closer. "It really is you!" "Dane?" Spots also took half a step closer, badly confused. "Numer's at the castle with Cloud," she told them. "Go on. I'll see you soon." "Come on," ordered Brokefang. "You hold up the hunt." With a sigh, Dane followed. Time passed, how much she could not say, as they followed the scent in the road to the western pass. Brokefang kept them to a strict schedule of short gallops broken up with longer periods of easy trotting, much as the palace training masters directed those periods of torture known as cross-country runs. Dane gloried in the power of this strange, familiar body. In her own skin she had been tired. Now she was not. She could run all day if the weather stayed like this, with a touch of crispness in the air. The pack had reached the tree-covered shoulders of the mountains when she began to feel an ache build in her paws. "They are tender because you are new." That was Sharpnose. "You must build up your pads and your wind to stay with a pack. You will have to practice." "We had to do that," Runt called from the rear of their column. "You can too." Dane looked at Paw, then had an idea. Wading into the stream by the road, she let the water bathe, then numb her sore feet. "Never thought of that," Short Snout commented. "So two-leggers are good for something," retorted Dane. He nipped playfully at her, and she at him. "Stop," Brokefang ordered, "and behave." He had checked each horse pat in the road. This time he called for them to join him. They gathered around the dung, tails wagging, to confer. The spoor was only an hour old. The horse was young, healthy, female, and beginning to overheat. The pack speeded up. Dane panted as she ran, the day catching up even with her wolf shape. When they next stopped to inspect the mare's leavings, tails wagged harder than ever. This pile was soft and wet, barely 5 minutes old. Nearby, a splash of heady horse sweat marked the ground. The mare's rider was pushing hard. She hadn't rested her mount on the climb to the pass. Perhaps she even had tried to make the horse go faster. She had thrown away the advantage of her long head start on the wolves. They moved out. Now their noses caught the mare's odor on the wind, mixed with saddle leather, oil, and gardenias. The road topped a crest. When the pack reached it, they saw the horse and rider below. Dark with sweat, the mare was drinking too fast from the stream. Ironically, they had stopped where the trail to the caverns crossed the road. Spreading out to form a horizontal line, the wolves began to run. With the quarry scent in her nostrils, Dane forgot her aching feet and ran with them. They knew the mare had to catch their odor soon, but this was a good spot to circle her. She could only run west, and Dane already was calling the marmots to block the road. On either side, the horse was walled in by rock and loose earth. Footing that would cripple her was not a problem for the wolves. The mare smelled them and spun, white showing all the way around her eyes. Yolaine, riding side saddle, was nearly thrown. She kept her seat and tried to whip their mount into flight. The wolves streamed over the rocks to either side of horse and rider and surrounded them. Dane's blood was up. A run meant a hunt to her wolf self. A hunt meant a kill. She wanted to leap for the mare's throat, to bring her down and feast, but caution held her, though she fought it. The mare was shod in hard metal. To lunge in would be to court broken ribs or a broken head. If Yolaine had not been riding her, the pack never would have gone after such dangerous prey. The wolves drew away from those hooves and waited. The mare held still. Yolaine screamed and kicked, flailing at her mount with her riding crop. The horse staggered and came within jumping distance of Dane. Forgetting the danger, the girl wolf lunged. Battle slammed against her side and knocked her down. "Stupid," the pack told her as one. "You will get your brains bashed in, and we will lose a hunter." Sheepishly, Dane flattened her ears and whined, backing to her place in the circle. Once there, she turned to lick her ribs and thought, "What am I doing?" Straightening, she called, "Hoof sister." The mare faced her, quivering. "You are not hoof kin," she said, breath coming hard. "You are a hunter. I will not have you in my herd." "I'm not a hunter. Not a true hunter." The girl freed some magic to connect her to the horse. Briefly her form shifted, trying to develop hooves, but she gripped her wolf shape and held it. "Hoof sister," she said, "dump the human. Run to your stable. You will be safe. It is not you that we want. It is her." The mare hesitated. Enraged, Yolaine struck her mount's tender ears. The horse had borne enough. She bucked the human off and raced for home. Those wolves between her and the village moved aside and let her pass. Yolaine lay white and still on the ground. Dane trotted over and put her nose close to the human's face. Her keen ears heard the soft drag of breath. Dunlap's lady was alive. The pack made themselves comfortable, keeping their circle around Yolaine, and Dane walked over to the stream. Sitting down, she began to recover her true shape. It was harder than she had expected. Her body liked the wolf shape. Bruises and hot feet notwithstanding, the wolf shape felt good, even natural. The girl had to fight a sense that she was meant to stay a wolf. Every little distraction, bird song, the pups romping, the call of a distant horn, meant she had to stop and begin again. At last she found her two-legger self and slid into it. Opening her eyes, she made an unhappy discovery. Her clothes were gone. All she wore was a silver badger's claw and its leather thong. "And why am I still wearing you and nothing else?" she demanded. "Where is your flap fur? Are you taking a bath now?" asked Runt curiously. Luckily, she had left most of her packs in the nearby caves. "I'll be right back," she told the wolves. "Don't let her go anywhere." When Dane returned, wearing clothes she had wanted to wash before she put them on again, Yolaine was conscious. She greeted Dane with a flood of bad language. Dane listened until the woman began to repeat herself, then said, "Shut up." As it went against the grain to be so rude, even to Yolaine, she added, "Please." To her surprise, Yolaine gulped, then fell silent. "Much better," Brokefang said. The wolves had not moved from their circle around the captive. "Will you take her alone, or shall we drive her? I think you will need our help." "On your feet, milady," Dane ordered. "We're all going to walk back to the village. If you behave yourself, you'll be fine. Just don't try to run, or my friends will bring you down." Yolaine got to her feet. "If they're going to eat me, get it over with." Dane sighed. "They don't eat humans." "We could try eating one once," Short Snout offered, "just to see what she tastes like. It seems like this one isn't doing the human pack much good as she is." He walked closer to the woman, grinned up into her face, and licked his chops. Yolaine backed away so quickly she tripped on her skirts and fell. "Don't help," Dane chided her friend. "Let's go," she ordered as the noblewoman got to her feet once more. "You walk in front of me." Yolaine dusted her rump and passed the girl, nose in the air. Dane followed. The wolves ranged around the humans as they turned east. It was plain they did not mean for the walk to be pleasant for the captive. They often darted in at her to snap heavy jaws close to her hands, then dashed away. Short Snout liked to draw close to sniff and nibble at Yolaine's skirts. Yolaine chose not to call them to order. They had worked hard, and they needed a bit of fun. As far as she was concerned, the woman who had helped to bring so much destruction on Dunlap needed harrying. Halfway to the village, riders came to meet them. In the lead were Numer, the king's champion, and Sir Raoul. The knights wore armor marked by the day's hard fighting. The warriors behind them, a mixed company of the king's own and riders, also looked the worse for wear. Alana grinned at Dane when the two groups met. "I hear you can shapeshift these days." "Any ill effects?" asked Numer. "I didn't have my clothes when I changed back. Luckily we were by the caves. How are Taka and Mora and Tate and Flicker?" "Waiting at the castle," said Numer. "The squirrel needs some of your help." Sir Raoul dismounted and ruffled Dane's hair with one gauntleted hand. "Good work," he said with a grin. "We'll make a king's officer of you yet." Speaking of which, he went to Yolaine and put a hand on her shoulder. Voice formal now, he said, "Yolaine of Dunlath, I hereby arrest you in the name of King Jonathan and Queen Theod of Tortle for the crime of high treason." The pack lifted their voices in a triumphant howl. Yolaine shuddered. "I am guilty as charged. Now will you get me away from these monsters?" "They have a different idea of who's the monster here," retorted Dane, "and I think they have the right of it. Will someone give me a ride? My pads, my feet, are killing me."